less than 10 seconds.
Hey everyone, Michael Unger here from the H.R. McMillan Space Center, here with our bonus coverage for our Cosmic Night Gassy Giants. And we're going to be talking about a really interesting thing that happens in space. Of course, you go onto the internet, you see a bunch of really beautiful images of space. But what you may not know is that a lot of those images need to be processed before people get to look at them. And so there have been missions recently. One of them specifically, the Jupiter-Juno mission, of course, the Cassini mission around Saturn, and they made those images public for anyone to download them and do their own processing. So today, I found one of those people that have done some of their own processing with those images, and that is Kevin Gill. How are you, Kevin?
I'm very good. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to get into what you do with these images. We can sort of talk about them. But you also work at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, as a software engineer. So before we kind of get into that, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at JPL and how you got started processing images from these missions.
Yep. At JPL, like you said, I'm a software engineer. Currently working with, my main project is the data analysis tool as part of the NASA Sea Level portal, which allows the community and scientists to go on there and perform exploratory analysis on sea level related data sets in a mapping environment. I'm also working with related tools with the ECHO and with GRACE follow-on. And in increasing time, I'm working with Insight, with processing and working with the downlinked imagery coming down from that mission.
Okay, and so and obviously NASA put these out for anyone to pick up on. But what's sort of like got you interested? Is this something that you kind of like tinkering on your own? Like, were you sort of like a Photoshop dabbler and you kind of like working with images? Like, what inspired you to start to get into this work?
Actually, originally I was doing 3D graphics, but there's limited detail. I wasn't that great at it. So I started working with actual spacecraft imagery, because anything that NASA takes, including even ESA or JAXA, that's all released publicly because the taxpayers own it. So I started picking up on like Insight and Cassini stuff. This was back in like 2014. And learning how to process that. Let's do some good resources like at the Planetary Society for how to process those. And then started working my way into Juno once those started coming down in late 2016, 2017. And just it's just something I've learned to really enjoy doing.
Yeah. So let's get into that and sort of like walk people through. So for people out there that maybe want to get into this work on their own, or maybe with some kids that eventually maybe want to really get into it. So how would one go about starting to process some of these images?
Well, the Juno images, those released on their the mission website. Anyone can download them, and they come in either kind of a pre-processed version where you're able to download those and run whatever kind of filters you'd like on them. And they're already kind of pre-projected and assembled together. So they're really approachable. You can edit it in either Photoshop or GIMP or whatever photo editor you've used. I've done it on a cell phone with simple tools there. As you get more advanced, Juno's camera takes the images in an interesting way that they're kind of banded and takes multiple images per observation. As you get more advanced, you're able to figure out how to stitch those together and start producing higher resolution stuff, more at the native resolution of the camera, and then work with color and reprojecting into different things.
So, and I sort of like started off the top of, as someone who looks at a lot of space pictures, I know that these images need to be processed, but when I think about that, I think like, well, why do they need to be processed? Like, why can't NASA just release the images as be from the spacecraft? Or why is there a need for someone like you to kind of go in and do some work with them?
the cameras don't work like your standard, off the shelf cameras, like your Canons or Nikons or whatever. The filters, like with Cassini, the cameras were grayscale but had little filters in front of them and would take each color channel separately. So they'd wheel in front of the sensor, a red or a green or blue, or and so on. With Juno, it has some color bars and filters painted onto the sensor. Okay. So the top of the thing is blue, then a strip of green, then a strip of red. And as Juno turns, it will take a series of pictures. Those need to be reassembled back into a standard or into a normal picture that looks right to you.
Right.
Yeah. The Juno team decided to offload the work, because any image processing takes a bit of work, to the citizen scientists.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So it's like the citizen science area, because this is something like a relatively newish word when it comes to space missions, because this isn't how it classically was done. Like, let's say when Voyager was taking their pictures of the gas giants as they flew by, they didn't reach out to citizen scientists, I don't believe, to process those images. But so why are missions now reaching out to the public to get their help on some of these?
It's great for outreach. I know it's been very successful for Juno. The camera on Juno wasn't initially a science instrument.
Okay.
It wasn't even going to have the camera initially, but it was added on during development for outreach and for the other purposes. So it didn't have quite the budget for having a full team for developing the resources and processes for automating and working those images directly.
Yeah, that seems so amazing to me that they would not have put a camera on this spacecraft that's flying so close to Jupiter, because the images that we're getting are giving us a completely new picture of the planet than we've ever seen before. So I'm really curious, with the work that you're doing, are there any like discoveries that are sort of being made? Are you working with anyone on the Juno team and sort of like looking at stuff like, hey, this is kind of interesting, kind of a little bit different than maybe what they previously knew about the planet?
I talk with them a little bit, not too much, because they're busy doing their own thing. But there has been some discoveries with, specifically with Junocam, just because they're able to get unprecedented detail down to the surface. A news story came out pretty recently about the pop-up clouds.
Yeah.
And how the lightning interacts underneath them.
And were those pictures that were released from the news, were those ones that were taken from the camera?
Yes.
Amazing. And sort of, but the actual discoveries that were being made of like what was going on in those clouds was with the other instruments. So it's kind of like both were kind of like in conjunction with each other.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of those discoveries, they'll work with multiple instruments, bring them together, and to be able to figure out different aspects of what you're seeing.
Oh, this is really interesting. Do you ever think about sort of like what the possibilities would be like for future kinds of missions? Because now obviously we're seeing the government's NASA, European Space Agency, they're working with private companies, in conjunction. How could you see possibly a partnership with citizen science, like maybe even expanding on this model of everyone working together on these like incredible missions?
The open access to the data is always good. Able to corroborate or correlate information between Juno or Hubble, which actually was a pretty recent project that was completed. But as far as the open science and that the open access to data, and that's what the citizen scientists really latch onto.
Amazing. So for you yourself, obviously you probably must enjoy this work if you're kind of like doing it off the side of your desk, because obviously this is not part of your day job. You do work at JPL. This is something you do off the side of your desk. You yourself, what have you learned about through this process? Obviously you've gotten better at it the more you've done it. But when it comes to the planets themselves, have you learned anything about the planets as you've gone through this work?
A lot of trying to correlate what I'm seeing on Jupiter with what we see here on Earth.
Okay.
To try to get to look and recognize what I'm seeing when I look at Jupiter. And I learn, I'm learning how all the interactions between the different gases and the banding and zones and whatnot. It's just, and the colors are something else, and why those colors are what they are.
Interesting. Do you have any particular favorites from your time working with on Junocam?
The favorite images that I can see are a lot of the vortexes, or anything where you're seeing an up and down motion of the gases there. There's one that's particularly neat, where there's this long orange strip coming out of it, and you see the origin, this deep hole where all this stuff is coming out of, and is really neat.
Amazing. Yeah. And to end us off here, Kevin, for our event, we're getting everyone to sort of answer this question. We've got a couple experts going to be talking with Dr. Sean Brooks from JPL. So the question for you is, we're going to Europa. We're going to Titan. If you were to choose a place in the solar system to go next, and possibly that would have a citizen science camera on it that you could delve in and start to do some images on, where would you choose if you got the chance?
Wish is to build weather balloons and drop them into the gas giants.
Okay.
With cameras, with 360 cameras on them. If we could pull that off, anyone, I'll take any gas giant.
Wow.
That's my dream, the type of mission.
Yeah, because we've always classically just sort of like had like a very sort of like surface level, like on top of the atmosphere, and they have sent probes underneath, but certainly nothing resembling any kind of like images, right?
But yeah, no images there. I want, I dream of, in situ type measurements, being able to raise and lower the craft and whatnot. It would be a very new thing.
Amazing. So maybe hopefully in the future they'll create a mission, and then maybe they'll have the Kevin Gill camera that'll go in there and take some amazing pictures of the lower clouds of Jupiter.
Fingers crossed.
Amazing. Before we go, I do need to mention about your background there. What are we looking at behind you here, Kevin?
That's the sunset across town. I saw it, and I just got myself thinking how it would appear if we had rings around Earth. Aside from the dangers to any of our satellites, I just thought it would be kind of a beautiful scene.
Wonderful. And of course, that's Los Angeles. Is that where you live?
Yes, outside of Los Angeles.
Amazing. Los Angeles with a viewpoint of rings. What a wonderful sci-fi world that would be. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.